What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the show, man. Recap with Mo, where we getting ready to get into another episode breakdown of Bounce TV's own Johnson series, alright? But before we get into this thing, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss shiznit that's going down, alright? So the synopsis for this episode states that Omar witnesses Naomi out with another man. Greg sets a bad first impression when he meets with Chef Williams. Keith meets Jackee's parents for the very first time. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this thing. Alright, so we kicked this episode off with Jarvis. He's outside getting his workout on in the backyard when he receives a text message from one of his clients by the name of Steve. Now, if you don't know or you don't recall, Steve is like one of his prominent clients who he's been showing around for quite a while, and he's having a little issue with, landing the deal for him, all right? So anyhow, he receives a text message from Steve stating that he had to head out of town, so he won't be able to look at the property, all right? So that throws Jarvis off a little bit because he's like, what in the hell is he talking about? Like, we already have this appointment set up, and I'm ready to make this sale because that's what he needs for his company to stay afloat or whatnot. So, of course, Jarvis has to call him. He doesn't pick up the phone. So he's sitting there like, what in the hell is going on? So from there, we see Greg. Now, Greg is headed over to this, it looks like a restaurant setting type of environment or whatnot. And we see him looking through the window. He comes in and we see William Williams, all right? So William Williams is Kyle from Living Single. Now, he's supposed to be there at 9 o'clock. So when he shows up, it was like, hey, what's good? He puts his hands out to shake his hands or whatnot. William Williams is like, who are you? And it was like, oh, I'm Greg. I met you back at the, the little mixer thing, and you told me to meet here. So William is like, oh, yeah, you were supposed to be here at 9 o'clock. Greg is like, oh, man, I messed up, man. I went to the gas station, went and got me a scratch off, and, it's about $1 billion now, whoop, whoop, whoop. And William Williams is like, darn, that's a tongue twister. William Williams is like, hey, well, you don't need me if you out here scratching tickets. Like, you supposed to be here at 9 o'clock, but it's like 9:20 now. And he was like, okay, well, I thought you were talking about 9-ish. Now, let me go ahead and say this as a sidebar. Like, I've been late, a few times in life, man. But as I've grown older, man, and I'm just saying this for my people out here, it's all right to be on time. You know what I'm saying? Definitely, if you're trying to get your foot in the door, then Greg needed to be there on time. Not at 9:20, not at 9:30. Go ahead. You're trying to make a great first impression on William, so be there on time, or at least early, 10 minutes earlier than you need to be there. So anyhow, William is like, look, it is imperative that you learn how to be on time. Like, you going outside to scratch off on the ticket when you got something on the stove or in the oven or something like that, you can completely mess up your dish. So I was with him on that. Like, be potent with your, you see what I'm saying? So anyhow, he was like, hey man, can you give me another shot? So he was like, okay man, listen, I got a pile of dishes back there in the back. If you go back there and you do a good ass job, I will consider actually working with you to get you to where you need to go. And Greg is like, oh, so now you want me to wash some dishes? He was like, oh, so it's either that or you can walk your ass to you can either walk your ass to New York and go get me a cheesecake. Greg is like, we're in Atlanta, right? He was like, okay. So, you really have no other option. Like, you better go on back there and bust those suds. That's essentially what he's telling you right now. But anyhow, going on from there, we head over to the gym where we see Omar, we see Keith, we see, what's his name, Jarvis. So they getting their workout on or whatnot. And Keith is struggling like none other to lift this bar up. I don't know what's going on. But then after he gets done with doing that, he's one of those types that every time he does a rep, he goes to the mirror to see if there's any daggone changes, all right? There has yet to be any changes because you just finished one rep, all right? So like they told him in the gym, like it's going to take a lot more than that to see any changes. But he said, man, I'm seeing it. As long as you can see it, Keith, that's all that matters, man. Maybe. I'm sorry, y'all. But yeah, maybe that's it, man. But anyhow, while they're sitting down or relaxing or whatnot at the gym, Jarvis goes on to ask Omar, has he had any results from the mixer? Has he had any feedback or anybody reaching back out to him? And Omar conveys to him that, hey, yeah, I actually have a client, the guy that was working with the magazine. He wants me to potentially look into making an app for him, creating an app for him. And then, he's thinking about rebranding, whoop, whoop, whoop. Jarvis was like, yeah, plenty of companies do it. And then he says, yeah, by the way, can you hook me up with Stevie? Now, Stevie just so happens to be Jarvis' client. We just spoke about him. And Jarvis is feeling some type of way about that because he still has yet to hear anything from Stevie. So he's like, okay, man, I can't even help myself really because I ain't heard nothing from him. He was like, well, just call him back to, try to set an appointment or whatnot. Jarvis was like, look, I've already called him. Nothing has came from it. He said everything was cool. Like, I just don't understand. The only thing that has changed since the last time we spoke was the whole thing with Antoinette. And he was like, that's what it is. So Omar is like, are you sure that's what it is? He was like, do you think she had something to do with it? He was like, that's definitely possibly what it is because that's the only thing that has changed. Outside of that, they've been pretty cool with their relationship or whatnot. So anyhow, Keith on the other side is like, well, why don't you just pay him a personal visit? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna definitely do that, all right? So next we see Keith and Omar sitting in the sauna. So while they're in the sauna, Keith states that, he has a few ideas for their self-care day. Now, let me just go ahead and say this, fellas, it's all right to, do a little bit of self-care. It's beneficial for us. Definitely, our women love for us to do that as well. I'm just going to say that. Now, I'm not the one to go all out and put all this extra into it. But, I will go get a massage every so often. I will do some yoga. I will do, some things to keep myself together, man, and just keep my mental together. Now, there are some things I feel or I personally consider too far for me, but for each his own. But anyhow, Keith is like, look, man, we can do facials, we could do pedicures. Of course, Omar's like, I ain't doing no damn pedicure. But I've had a pedicure done before, man, and my wife was like, she was there with me, and actually she was getting hers done as well. So, it was cool. My feet wasn't too bad, man, but to see that cheese grater on there, I was like, ooh. I was like, what in the hell? And it wasn't bad, but, just having somebody to do that, to make you feel good, it goes a long way. All right, so if you are listening to this, man, just know that it can benefit you in the long run, all right? So, yeah, Keith was talking about the facials, the pedicures, and yoga. And Omar's like, okay, yeah, I'll do yoga. And Keith is like, are you sure? He was like, look, don't ask me again. Like, if you ask me again, pretty much that's going to be it. I'm not doing a damn thing. But anyhow, going on from there, Omar's like, hey, bro, what you got going on tonight? Well, Keith conveys to him that he's actually going to meet with Jackee's parents for the very first time. So Omar was like, oh, okay, y'all moving to the next level or whatnot. Keith is a little nervous, and Omar's like, look, you'll be good. He says, just don't tell them that joke that you always like to tell people. Keith is like, look, man, that's my best joke. He was like, man, look, I'm your boy and all, but that joke is not funny, all right? So anyhow, he was like, please don't say that joke. He was like, well, I won't say it unless it just comes up. It's going to come up somewhere in between. He's just going to make it come up, right? So anyhow, Omar's like, please don't make it come up. So anyhow, going on from there, we head over to Jarvis. Now Jarvis done left the spot and he done drove over to the property where he sees Stevie and he sees Antoinette. Now when he gets over there, he's already seen the cars parked out in front. He comes to the back. They standing outside in the pool discussing the property. And Jarvis is like, "What's good?" Stevie like, "What's up? What y'all doing?" And Antoinette is like, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you here." He was like, "Why not? This is the property that I'm actually showing. Why not? Why wouldn't I be here, Antoinette?" So anyhow, Stevie is just standing there with his little champagne bottle or glass or whatnot. And Antoinette goes on in to say, "Well, I was just telling him that, you got a whole lot of stuff going on right now." And he was like, "What do you mean by that?" So what has happened is, people, that Antoinette pretty much done told Stevie, and Stevie has told Antoinette some personal things that, Jarvis has conveyed to the both of them. And they put it together, and Antoinette has used that against Jarvis to win over the client, Stevie. So she goes on to tell him that, at my company, we don't allow personal issues to, get in front of our clients. So Jarvis is like, "What are you talking about with this?" She was like, "Well, I know I told him about the divorce and you going through a whole lot of stuff right now." He was like, "I told you that stuff confidentially." And then he looks at Stevie and he was like, "I also told you some things confidentially that I thought we had a bond or a relationship with, but you went on to use that against me." And he was like, "Look, I don't want no problems. I just want to get to, the sale of this property. That's pretty much all I want to do." So long story short, Jarvis is like, "Okay, cool. I hope that she's able to get this sale, close this deal for you. You do what you do." He's pretty much washing his hands of it. That's what I'm assuming. But we already know how Jarvis is. He's so very damn competitive. I don't think he's going to let it go just like this, but we will find out, all right? So, before he leaves, though, he does drop a dime real quick because he makes a statement talking about how the little champagne that they were drinking at that time, he was like, "Antoinette, you could do a lot better than that, definitely with a deal like this, a sale like this. You got that cheap-ass bottle of champagne, but we all know how you like to save money, and I know that personally." So he's taking a dig at her because of their relationship, and you know what I'm talking about. So anyhow, she's like, "Oh, okay," and he walks off. Anyhow, I hope it works out for Stevie. Maybe Stevie will come back. Who knows? But anyhow, moving on from there, we next see Greg and William Williams. Now, I'm going to keep saying that William Williams because it just flows so well, all right? I almost said Wendy Williams, but I'm trying to correct trying to compose myself to make sure I read it right. So anyhow, we head back over to the restaurant and we see Greg over there washing dishes or whatnot. So he's almost finished. He's wiping sweat. And anyhow, so William Williams comes in and Greg is like, "Okay, I'm almost done. Like, I'm almost ready for you to sit down and just break everything down to me so I can get into this cooking business or whatnot." So William is like, "So you think this shit is that easy? Like, you think that I just walked in here one day and I just had a whole kitchen to myself, or I owned a business myself?" He said, "Man, I put in work, and essentially I didn't write down everything, but it seemed like about 40 years worth of work that he put into it, not to mention, going to school and all these things." So it took a while for him to get to this point. Greg is looking at it like it's easy, like I'm seeing it on social media, and I would have to admit that sometimes we see shit on social media, it makes it look so easy, but it's not. Like, people actually put in work and effort to get to these points in life where we see them striving and achieving great things. So William is like, "Look, man, it's not that easy." But he says, "Look, if that's what you want, then I can't really help you with that." But Greg is like, "Look, man, I just said on TikTok, people taking little ingredients, doing this or recipes or whatnot, and they make it look so simple. Can you just give me the cliff notes on it or something like that?" And William is like, he looks at him with that eye like for real, Like, is that where we're going with this when I just literally conveyed to you what it took for me to get here? So he's like, look, all right, let me go ahead and say this and I'm going to leave out. He says, everybody can follow a recipe, but everyone can't create one. Let me say that one more time. Everybody can follow a recipe, but everybody can't create one. I said, drop the mic. I said, all right, bro. Like, and that's very true. Like, you're following somebody's recipe that they took time and effort to create, Greg. So respect this man's level of expertise and listen to, if you're willing to learn, you're going to have to take some time to learn what he's going to offer you. But by the way, he tells him as he's leaving, he says, go ahead and finish those dishes over there on the counter as well. So anyhow, like I honestly eventually believe that Greg is going to, have to realize that if this is what he wants to do, if he loves to cook, which we can see he loves to cook, if he loves to cook like he said he does, then he's going to have to actually sit down and do it and do the time, put the time in. All right. So anyhow, going on from there, we head over to see Keith pulling up to this fat ass crib with his girl Jackee. Now, as we all know, he's getting ready to meet Jackee's parents for the very first time, so he's a little bit nervous about that. And we see him with the Bill Cosby sweater on. All right, I'm going to just put that out there because the person that we're going to talk about a little bit later mentions that as well. All right, so anyhow, when she comes in the house, he's looking around and he was like, damn. Like, so anyhow, she introduces him to her mother and her father. Her father just so happens to be the one and only Councilman Garrett. All right, so as we recall, they had a little situation that went down at the mixer where Keith was truly giving Councilman Garrett the business. He was pretty much grilling him like, what you going to do about small businesses? What about all the, businesses having to leave because they can't afford due to gentrification, whoop, whoop, whoop. And pretty much Councilman Garrett was like, look, changes are going all over the place. And essentially there's nothing we can do about it. It's just, it just embrace the change. And Keith is like, no, definitely, if you're talking like you're talking right now about keeping it black and keeping it strong and all of these things, then the backbone in all of this is the small business. So what are you going to do for those individuals, all right? So anyhow, getting back to where we are now, when he comes in, he was like, oh, damn, your daddy is Councilman Garrett. Councilman Garrett is like, yeah, we ran into each other. He tried to clown me in front of my folks, essentially. And he was like, no, I was just actually, just speaking up for the people that you're talking about. And of course, his daughter was like, oh, so y'all know each other. And that was pretty much it. So the wife was cool about it, but they sat down and then they had dinner. All right, so going on from there, we'll get back to them in a moment. But going on from there, we head over to the lounge where we see Omar walking around, mingling with everybody in the crowd. And he comes up on his Uncle Eugene, who actually owns the joint, all right? So Uncle Eugene is like, look, man, you need to dress better. I own this establishment, but I've given you this job to run this establishment as the manager. And I'm giving you an opportunity to do great things here. But while they're in the midst of their conversation, Omar is standing there and he looks, off to the side there and he sees this gentleman with this woman that looks like Naomi. So he was like, damn, is that Naomi? And Eugene turns around and he was like, yeah, that's Naomi. And he was like, oh, I got to go over there and talk to her. Uncle Eugene is like, hold on, wait a minute. What in the hell are you doing? Like, I know you just ain't going to walk up over there and you don't know what she's doing. You don't know what he's doing here. You don't know anything. So you don't need to go over there, cause a scene, embarrass me as well as yourself, as well as your ex-wife, like your soon-to-be ex-wife or whatnot. So you need to go ahead and leave. You know what? I'm going to go, and I appreciate the unk here because he's taking one for the team. He's like, look, I don't want you to get in no serious trouble. You go ahead and go home, go that direction and not over there, and I'll take care of it. I'll take care of this tonight. So anyhow, go ahead and leave. So anyhow, that's pretty much it. He want to go over there and holler at old boy, but like Uncle Eugene said, you don't know what's going on. You just need to chill the hell out. So anyhow, going on from there, we head back over to Keith and the Councilman Garrett's house. All right. So Garrett, Councilman Garrett, let me be respectful, all right? Councilman Garrett goes on to ask him, well, he's asking Keith, the typical questions that fathers like to ask, their potential, suitors for their daughter. And it was like, well, what do you do for a living? Well, he conveys to him that I am a photographer. This man here laughs in his face like none other. I'm like, what in the I'm like, what's going on? And it was like, for real, like, how do you feel when we can actually do your job through our cell phones? And I beg to differ. Even though I'm not a photographer, like, these phones can take awesome pictures, all right? They can. But there's a difference in when you have a for real photographer taking photos and you have me on my iPhone or my Samsung or whatever. Like, they take awesome shots, but there are some things that they do, some of the trainings that they've had that I will never be able to get to or with my phone. So we have to respect these professions, man. So anyhow, and there are some people out here making tons of money just being photographers. So I'm never going to knock anybody for doing their jobs and whatnot, because you questioning what they're bringing in or how, their influence or whatnot, you just don't know. So it just shows a lot about what Councilman Garrett does not know about photographers, all right? Now, of course, we find out that he actually went to Morehouse for communication, but we also know that he's also self-taught as a photographer. So that's another thing probably that Councilman Garrett is looking at. All right. So anyhow, going on from there, Jackee's mom is like, oh, you know what? We actually got some old photos in the garage that I think, you can actually do something with and develop them because they've been in there for decades. Of course, Councilman Garrett is like, they ain't been in there no damn decades or whatnot. And it seems like they've been in there for decades. Don't start with me right now. And he shuts up real quick when she starts talking, if y'all notice that. But anyhow, going on from there, they leave the room, the ladies leave the room, and they leave the fellas in there. Now, remember, if you recall, we go back to when they were in the sauna, Omar and Keith, he told him specifically not to bring up this joke in particular. Well, Keith goes on, I guess he's nervous and he's forgotten what Omar has told him initially, because he goes on in and he tells this joke. Of course, Councilman Garrett is like, what? What did you say? What? And Keith is like, oh, never mind. Like, bro, the joke is not good. Stop telling people this joke. Like, it's not a great icebreaker. Anyhow, you're dealing with the wrong one if you're trying to make this a rosy situation with Councilman Garrett when he already feels some type of way about you, man. It's not going to work. So anyhow, that's pretty much the end of the episode, man. What are your thoughts on this episode? I know for me personally, and I'm going to let y'all go from here, is I'm noticing 4 guys who are in 4 different walks in life. Yes, they're going together, but essentially they're in 4 different stages in their walk, in their lives, all right? So you got some who are lackadaisical about their lives right now. They really don't know where they are going. They don't know where the end is, but they know they want to do something. They want to achieve something. And then you have somebody over here who is a high performer. They're wanting to achieve greatness higher than they've ever thought of. And they're getting cheated this way, and they're having to, pretty much figure out what to do next, all right? So anyhow, that's pretty much it, man. I'm going to rate this episode probably about an 8.5, all right? So with that being said, let me know your thoughts down below. I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.